new networks like News Nation that give me a platform.
The Hill,
The Hill, they like me, but then they turned on me on Gaza.
Oh yeah.
But I like watching them. I think that they're trying to play it straight. That they don't have an ideology really. But
can I ask, what was it that they turned on you for Gaza?
Well, the woman who's on that show, Brianna, who was, I think she was Bernie's press secretary, and she feels like she accepts the narrative that Israel. My understanding is that Israel has no legitimacy in the region, and that it doesn't have a right to defend itself, and that the war is in Gaza is sort of a war of aggression by Israel, and that they should be out.
Right. Yeah, you caught a lot of heat about the Israel stuff. Again, which goes to the, if you wanted to just read the room and just do the talking points, you could just be like, bam, 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 and get out and be the man.
That's a tough one. There's no real talking points on Israel.
Yeah, but if you were younger voters,
it's two clashing narratives. But
yeah,
the younger voters, the people of the anti-war movement, the left wing of the Democratic Party that was kind of starting to lean toward me. A lot of those people are believe that they're helping Palestine by supporting Hamas, which I don't think is a good way to look at it. I think you have to separate Hamas from Palestinians. I consider myself extremely pro-Palestinian, and I think leaving Gaza in the hands of Hamas is a non-starter. It means that nobody can really rebuild Gaza. It means that Hamas continues operating their kleptocracy there, and training the kids to hate, to kill, to invade Israel. I don't see that it's there's been 5 ceasefires, and every one of them Hamas has used to rearm, to regroup, to hoist the banner, and to attack again. And Hamas says that's what we're going to do. We're going to do October 7th, October 7th, October 7th until Israel's gone. Oh, they don't want any territorial concessions. There's nothing you can negotiate. In fact, in their charter, they have a number of provisions that say even negotiating with Israel is a violation of Islamic law. So I don't see how you sit down and how you just stop fighting if they've declared war. They've Since 2006, they've shot an average of 2,000 missiles a year at Israel. This war has been going on for 21 years. It really started in 2001. And I don't see, that you just stop fighting. I don't understand it.
I heard a rumor that Netanyahu funded Hamas. You ever hear that rumor?
Israel did not create Hamas. Yeah. Hamas created itself, but Netanyahu has approved the funding of Hamas through Qatar, at least $1.5 billion and probably closer to $5 billion. And you don't have to speculate about his motives. Part of his motives was to keep peace. And this is what he'll say. We were buying them off to try to stop them from attacking us. But he also said very clearly at one point that it's better to support Hamas because as long as Hamas exists, they can't, the Gazan Palestinians won't make common cause with the West Bank, which is, because the Palestinian Authority, which runs the West Bank, is antagonistic to Hamas. And to keep them apart assures that there won't be a two-state solution. So I think Netanyahu was, part of his motive was to sabotage a two-state solution. And people say, okay, well, that was what he was doing. and therefore we should condemn all of Israel. But, he's one guy.
Yeah.
And, I mean, when George Bush and Dick Cheney were running this country, they did some pretty sketchy stuff, including invade a country that did nothing to us.
Yeah.
And destroy it. And yet, we don't all hate America and say that we have no right to exist.
Fair point. That's a pretty fair point. Yeah, it's one of those things I always try to read about it, and no matter what I read, it's like swayed one way or the other deeply, and you're like, they get me all the time. But I know a lot of the independent younger YouTubers are pro-Palestine. But
yeah, the Dave Smith had a good one. Our friend Dave Smith, he's a libertarian Jewish man.
Oh, I know Dave Smith. I debated him.
Right.
I did an hour debate with him on Palestine.
He had a good tweet about it the other day about how the media now, like the media allowed, like the BLM, the protests that they got pretty wild. They were all supporting that, but the second college students almost entirely peacefully protesting Israel, they are condemning across the board almost. And he was like, the reason it's simple is because the BLM protests made Trump look bad. The Palestine-Israel conflict makes Biden look bad. And that's why the media is clearly, I don't know, I thought that was interesting. I don't think I have a question there, but.
No, it was a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I think.
Yeah, no, I read the same thing. I liked it too.
Yeah.
No, I liked it too. And it is true. It is kind of nuts.
What do you think of that?
I mean, I think people should be able to peacefully protest. And, that's part of the right of being an American. So, when, at some point, as though those protests become across the line, if you block students from going to class, if you block Jewish students from going to class, if you're occupying buildings, if you're trespassing, the university has a right to, to discipline you. The rights are very different if you're on a state school campus, because the state really should not be censoring anybody on the First Amendment. But if you're in a private school campus and you have community guidelines that protect, for example, non-white students, the same protection should be given to Jewish students.
Yeah, it sucks because the thing they do that I don't like with the Israel debates, if you're like, I don't like what Israel's doing in this case, or like you're anti-Semitic, you hate the Jews, and it's like, dude, I truly don't. But that's the one trap I think they fall into, where it's like, you must hate Jewish people, and it's like, no, dude, I just think that one particular instance is kind of bad. So
yeah, it's tough. I feel like Israel is a democracy. It's the only democracy in the Mideast, and that part of the duty of living in a democracy is that you criticize your own government, and that we all have I don't know if an obligation, but we all have a right to criticize the government of Israel without being anti-Semitic. I think it turns into anti-Semitism when you're applying a double standard, when you're judging Israel by standards that you're not judging the neighboring countries or West Bank or Gaza. If you say, Israel is guilty of genocide, which clearly it is not. Israel, there were in 1948 when the Palestinians left Israel, 750,000 of them left. There's now 7.2 million. So it's the opposite of genocide. And if you look at the surrounding countries during that war, those countries expelled their Jewish populations. There's many of those countries, for example, Jordan, where there's not a single Jew. And the countries that still have, there's only, I think, 15,000 Jews remaining in all of those countries. And that is a genocide, and it's continuing. And those countries are also committing genocide, many of them against Christians, like real, organized, systematic, we're going to kill you if you don't leave. And that's not true in Israel. Israel, if you're a Palestinian in Israel, there's 1.8 million Palestinians who have Israeli citizenship, and they have all the rights of Jews. They vote in elections. They can run for the Knesset. There's 10 Arabs who are serving in the Knesset. They can run for prime minister. They serve on every level of the judiciary. In fact, 4 years ago, a district court judge who is Arab convicted an Israeli prime minister of corruption and put him in jail for 7 years. And that decision was upheld by an Arab judge on the Supreme Court. Nothing like that could happen in the West Bank. In fact, these protests, if you tried to do these kind of protests in the West Bank or Gaza, you would be killed. You know, there's no free speech. There's no freedom of press. There's freedom. In fact, I think there's 27 states in the Mideast, and I think 26 of them have an official religion, and Israel is the only one that doesn't. Israel has freedom of religion. You can worship anybody you want in Israel without penalty. You can, people who are Arab or Druze or other nationalities and ethnicities, Shia or Sunni, have all the same rights as a Jew. So, saying that you're, saying that Israel commits genocide without talking about what's really happening around them is a double standard. And when there's no freedom of the press. There's no, in West Bank or Gaza. If you even talk about these things, about opposing the leadership, your life is at risk. If you're gay, you get killed.
Heard that. Yeah.
If you're a woman, you have no rights. There's,
Yeah, I've heard they're pretty tough on that as
Yeah.
well. What did Dave Smith say?
Tough on crime.
Tough on. What did Dave Smith say?
what?
What did Dave Smith say to all that? What did he say? Nah.
Oh, well, we didn't, Dave is a very smart guy.
Yeah.
He's one, and that's why I wanted to talk to him about this. Because, I wanted to talk to them. I think he's probably the smartest guy out there on that, from that point of view. Oh, he avoided a lot of these. Our conversation avoided a lot of those issues. And I think it was much narrower conversation. I think.
Yeah, those debates spin off into like in 1942, the jurors, blah, 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 and they did this, and the battle of blah, blah, blah. And you're like, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, they should really, put that into more of a ceasefire. But it is tough because,
it's hard to talk about the issue without talking about the history.
Yeah.
Because it goes, there's kind of an assumption that Israel is not a legitimate country somehow. And that all of those countries were created by the British and the French after World War I when they cut up the Ottoman Empire. And Woodrow Wilson had said to them, I will only participate in this war if the people who are living in those countries get to govern those countries. So Britain was given the leadership over the administration of the Palestinian Mandate, which was Palestine, which was one of the bigger chunks of the Ottoman Empire. And Britain made a decision. They actually went and interviewed people, and they interviewed the Jews and the Arab. There was a Jewish population and an Arab population, and the Jews are always been a second-class race. They were called dhimmis since Muhammad conquest. And the Muslim leader, whose name was Mufti al-Husani, said, if this is all our land, there's nothing here for the Jews, and we don't even want a state even a mile wide for Jews. And any Jew that stays here will have second-class citizenship. So the British said the Jews had helped the British in World War I and World War II, and the Arabs had been against them. Oh, the Jews had taken Israel's promise that we're going to give you your homeland here. They said they were going to give them all of Palestine. Instead, they gave 85% of Palestine to Arabs, and they gave them a little sliver, about 10 to 15%. And so Israel, but all of those nations were created out of whole cloth, and none of them made any sense. I mean, Syria had a Kurdish population in it that was never given a homeland. The Christians were given a homeland in Lebanon because there's a lot of Maronite Christians, so they were given their own homeland. the Jews were given up a small, tiny little homeland in Palestine, which is, where there had been a Jewish presence there for 2,700 years. The Arabs were given most of it. And but there's a feeling among the Arabs that Jews shouldn't have any of it, and that's really what this dispute is about.
How could we end it?
Nukes. No.
Listen,
They keep bringing that shit up.
I know.
The thing is that Israel is at peace with two of its neighbors. When I was growing up, it was inconceivable that Israel would ever have a peace agreement with Jordan or Egypt. And it has peace agreements. Now you have the Abraham Accords that are three more nations that want to make peace with Israel. And it appeared that Saudi Arabia also wants to join the Abraham Accords. And, Saudi Arabia did something really interesting, which is after 9/11, because Saudi Arabia had a very, very radicalized population. And those were the people, I think 26 of the hijackers on 9/11 were Saudis, because they had these Wahhabi, this strain of Wahhabism, which is a very radical form of Islam and jihadist form. And the Saudi Arabian government had encouraged it. But after 9/11, they were critiqued all over the world. And they made a decision, we're going to de-radicalize. And they put in place all of these programs to de-radicalize their population, and it worked. And so I think the ultimate solution is economic development. We need, Gaza should be one of the richest, most pleasant places to live in the world. It has miles of white sand beaches. It's the beautiful bluffs. It has the richest agricultural land. It has a foot of topsoil. It's an oasis, so it has abundant fresh water. It has a port that is at the confluence of the Mediterranean Sea and the Suez Canal and all the trade routes from Africa, Mideast, Asia, and Europe. It should be the Singapore of the West. And if you had people who are focused on economic development, this place would be thriving. But instead, all of the money that they get, they steal. The top guy at Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, has a net worth of $5 billion, which he's stolen every penny of it. His two lieutenants have a net worth collectively of $6 billion. And all the other money they get, they spend building an underground city, 300 miles of tunnel. Imagine the innovative and the entrepreneurial and the resourcefulness of these people to be able to make 300 miles of tunnels under their city. And all that's gone to war. What if you put those, that resourcefulness to work actually building a society that people could be proud of, which is what the Jews did. The Jews took a piece of Israel, of Palestine, a little tiny sliver 9 miles across, and it's now got one of the highest GDPs in the world. And it was barren wasteland for thousands of years. And, the people in Gaza have that capacity. And I think if the world comes together around them and says, we're not going to tolerate Hamas anymore, but we're going to create a Marshall Plan so that, you and your children and generations of children can thrive. This is what we did after World War II. The Nazis ran Germany. We denazified them, and now they're the richest country in Europe. And nobody worries about them going to war because we got rid of that ideology. The same thing happened in Japan. It's the richest, Japan, I think, third richest country in the world. So, I think you can de-radicalize them with good leadership. The problem is that, there's some institutions there, including the United Nations, that have actually amplified the problem rather than trying to solve it.
That's a good answer.
The regime
So
changes.
far, is this your funniest interview that you've ever done?
This is good.
No, that's good.
But the regime changes in Germany and Japan, that was a pretty heavy cost.
I mean,
It's going to be harder to